Well, hey everybody, welcome to the show tonight. Mike Griffith here. It's Friday Night Mike, and what a week it's been. I'm still catching up. I got notes all over. I've been trying to keep up with this Georgia-Auburn game, try to get a feel for this, right? I mean, Georgia is 7-point favorite. I saw it was 6.5. I guess now it's 7.5. It's kind of all over the map. I think early on, a lot of people might have been taking the points at Auburn because they were going, oh my gosh, how bad did Georgia look in the first half? And then as the week goes on, you reflect back and you say, as bad as they looked in the first half, they still won 37-10. And then you looked around the rest of the SEC and you realized that, well, maybe nobody really looked that good. I know that Nick Saban said on the conference call this week, he thought that there was more parity in the league than there'd been in the past. I think I would agree with that. I don't think Saban talks just to talk. I also liked what he said about how this year would really show the DNA of every program because there wasn't the external factors that you're accustomed to get you pumped up in terms of crowds at home or crowds on the road. The COVID testing, I think, prevents the student athletes maybe from mixing and being around the student body and as much as they typically are. So I think the teams are more insulated. So I think what we're going to see is the results of more self-motivation and more of the self-standards of excellence that Nick Saban's talked about. And I know that seems like a lot of mumbo-jumbo to people, but I really enjoy listening to Nick Saban's psychology of game. There was a time when I was really kind of almost resentful of Nick Saban's success. Oh, that Nick Saban, what's he doing at Alabama? How's he doing it? But over the course of time, as things continue to change, whether it's rules, whether it's the coaching staff, whether it's challenges from other programs, I've really gained respect for Nick Saban. Now that said, Nick Saban hasn't been the same without Kirby Smart. I mean, this has been a really big split. Now, when Kirby was there, Alabama won 4 national titles the 8 years that Kirby was a defensive coordinator. Without Kirby, only 1 national title in the last, 5 years? So I think Kirby Smart and Nick Saban were kind of a thing, kind of a combo. And Kirby hasn't beat Nick yet, but boy, he came close, right? 2017 shoulda, woulda, coulda. 2018 had him down, and we're going to find out in a few weeks. But first things first, here come the Auburn Tigers and Gus Malzahn, a true rival. And I don't know if you had a chance to read my story earlier this week about the rivalry between Gus Malzahn and Kirby Smart. But you think about it, and it's only natural. It goes back to 2009 when Gus was hired at Auburn and Kirby was at Alabama. I mean, you're pretty much assigned mortal enemies. It's like, okay, Gus, you're going to call the offense for Auburn, and Kirby, you're going to call the defense for Alabama. And so what are these guys going to do? They're going to study each other all year long. They're going to be like stalkers and talk to everybody that's played. What do you think about Gus? What'd you do against Gus? You know that Kirby and Will Muschamp talk, and and Gus was such a creative guy, he just kind of appeared out of thin air, right? After 14 years in the Arkansas high school ranks, he's suddenly there at Arkansas under Houston Nutt, and he wins Coordinator of the Year. So Gus came in with a lot of great ideas, and nobody really had too much of a book on him, even when he went to Auburn, right? So in Alabama won that first game, but Auburn did enough that Saban made comments about how he felt like Alabama got their butts kicked, even though they won the game. And then 2010 was the big Cam Newton game. And I guess I'm just fascinated because now it's year 12 of Kirby-Gus, or matchup number 12 of Kirby-Gus. And Kirby's won 8 of the 11. I think the important stats to keep in mind is that 4 out of the last 5 years, Kirby Smart Georgia 4 out of the last 5 meetings, Kirby Smart's Georgia team has held Gus Malzahn to 14 or under points. Gus is 1-16 when Auburn scores 20 or fewer points. So to me, the formula's there. If this Georgia defense shows up and keeps Auburn under 20 points, then I think this should be a win. Now, I'm not like the roulette guy that says, well, it's landed on red 10 times, and so it's going to land on red an 11th. I'm more the guy that goes, I'm going to start betting on black, right? Because, so I guess what I'm saying is, while those historical trends might provide some comfort to Georgia fans, and I think hold water, that generally speaking, when Auburn's not moving the ball on offense, they're not a good team. I don't think they win many defensive struggles. I don't think we can be completely comfortable. We have to recognize this is a COVID-19 year. A lot of unprecedented things are happening. And, you know, who knows now that Chad Morris is the offensive coordinator. Could Chad Morris be the changeup that Gus Malzahn needs to kind of get off the snide against the Georgia defense? Dan Lanning, you know, year 2 for Dan. He obviously did a great job against Auburn last year. Auburn didn't score until the 4th quarter. But, you know, what's the takeaway from that? I think the biggest factor on this year's game alone that I look at and why I felt comfortable picking Georgia to win by 10 to 14 points on the SEC network was because of the inexperience of the offensive line at Auburn. They have 4 players that are only going to be making their 2nd career start on that Auburn offensive line. And Georgia, I think, has the best defensive front 7 in the country, especially the way Nakobe Dean played at Arkansas. I was very impressed with 17. He was all over the field. Now, we know what you're going to get from Monty. You know, Monty in the middle is going to plug gaps, but the way that Nakobe Dean played sideline to sideline, I haven't seen that kind of speed there. No offense to Tate Crowder, he did a great job, but I think Nakobe Dean could be an upgrade. I was also very impressed with Lewis Cine. Lewis has gained 15 pounds since last season. If there was one thing that stood out to me when I interviewed Lewis after the Sugar Bowl, it was how small he was. You know, just thin, and I thought, boy, this isn't a guy that's going to hold up for a season. But he gained 15 pounds, and I thought he looked great in that game. So let's go ahead and get our shares out of the way. You know, we always do that at the start of the show. I know, it's kind of boring. Sorry. Here we go. Talking football on a Friday night. And I appreciate y'all sharing it. It's what keeps Friday Night Mike going, you know, and I look there and I see that enough people want to see the show and care about the show, and I go, yeah, we're going to keep doing it. Especially before this game, because I know a lot of Georgia fans are worked up this week. You know, we did our cover 4 last night with Connor Riley and Brandon Adams and Jeff Sentell, and we talked about what we expected to happen at quarterback. And then I got kind of a tip, I guess you could say, and someone said, hey, I think it's going to be Stetson Bennett. And I said, okay, I think so too, and I'm going to go with it. And I wrote a story last night saying Stetson Bennett expected to start. Now, that said, Kirby can throw a curveball at any time. And who knows, maybe that's what Kirby wanted to do, was throw people off. I mean, Kirby is a very wily guy, right? And as a defensive coordinator himself, he knows the value of the element of surprise. He also knows what he's up against in Kevin Steele. This Auburn defensive coordinator is as good as they come, folks. He really, a lot of people thought he should have got the Tennessee head coaching job over Jeremy Pruitt. And a lot of people were surprised that he didn't, because he's a very experienced guy. So in Kevin Steele, Auburn's kind of got a head coach of defense. This guy is really good. He's really good. And he's going to have a plan ready for each of the Georgia quarterbacks. Now, he's seen Dwan Mathis and he's seen Stetson Bennett. And we know that Auburn has the personnel to defend Stetson better than Arkansas did. I don't know how much of that was the surprise element. You know, I would have thought that maybe Sam knew enough about Stetson to know what he was going to get, but I don't think they knew a lot about Todd Monken and how Todd was going to call plays and how good that Georgia offense was going to look. Now, I've kind of had a running discourse, argument / whatever with a lot of Georgia fans, because I refer to it as an air raid. And they go, Mike, that's not an air raid. And I go, well, actually it is. And I suppose, you know, we're getting into semantics. What is an air raid? Okay, well, my definition of an air raid is an offense that sprays the ball around and uses multiple receivers and spreads the field and puts a team in second and manageable every down. Essentially, you're passing to set up the run. And I think that's what you saw with Stetson Bennett. And that's really when the Georgia run game got on track, was the second half. Once that air raid got the tempo going, you saw Stetson, 12 different people that caught passes, the way he was able to spray that ball around. Now, what Stetson's not able to do is throw the deep ball, is the arm strength, okay? He's got good college arm strength, but he doesn't have Jake Fromm arm strength. Jake is probably lower 25% NFL arm strength, but Jake is such a great processor that he gets away with it. I think Stetson's a processor, but his arm strength's another level down. And so I think Kevin Steele's going to know that. And so maybe some of those passes that we saw on the perimeter to Kearis Jackson or Demetrius Robertson that gained those 4 to 7 yards and put Georgia in a good second down situation, I think they're going to be harder to come by. I think Auburn's going to move everybody closer to the line of scrimmage. And I think that could make it hard for the run game too. I don't think you're going to see the alleys that you saw against Arkansas in the second half. So now what Stetson can give you that JT Daniels can't get you is mobility. And Stetson had some really good runs that I think were underrated. You know, I really liked his 4th and 2 run. I thought his conversion run was impressive. And then there was another time on a 2nd and 10, he pulled it down and went 11 yards. And didn't just, it wasn't like he just had 11 yards to run. I mean, he made some moves. I think Stetson Bennett, his most underrated characteristic is his ability to run with football and his speed. He's a fast guy and he's a skilled runner. So that's why I think he's going to start, because I think Kirby likes having a quarterback with mobility to start out the game, and because he's that extra offensive guy that the defense doesn't account for, right? If you have got a quarterback that can run, it's almost like playing 12 on 11. And you pair that with the fact that Georgia's offensive line, let's be honest, it was kind of shaky, right? So do we see Owen Condon start again at right tackle, or do we see Warren McClendon, who came in for Owen? That's one thing to look for. Trey Hill had some trouble with snaps, right? That's a big deal. You know, not just the ones that you saw, you know, get by Dwan, or the ones that were too low, or the one that was too low for Stetson, but just being off, a step to the right, a step to the left. Kirby was talking about how that gets everything off track. Not just the timing, but even the run game gets thrown off. And Kirby attributed that to the run game. So not doing as well. So that snap is going to be very important. And so do you start Trey Hill, or do you start Warren Erickson, who came on in place of Trey Hill? I don't know the answer to that. You know, if you start Warren, then Trey goes to right guard and Ben Cleveland gets kicked out. So there's a lot of questions on personnel offensively. And I said it a couple weeks ago, and I feel kind of good about it. I called it the kaleidoscope offense. And I called it the kaleidoscope offense because it looks different depending on who's in there. It's like you look through those kaleidoscope and, you know, you twist the prism, and the prism changes shapes and colors, and you go, oh, that looks good. That doesn't look as good. And that's kind of what I look at when I look at the Georgia offense. Boy, that looked good with Stetson Bennett, but it didn't look so good with Dwan Mathis. Now, that's just week 1. Who knows? Maybe week 2, maybe Dwan Mathis looks better. I think Dwan, if I had to bet, I think we'll see Dwan for at least one series. I think that Dwan brings enough with his running ability and his big arm to give you at least a package. Even if it's only 6 or 8 plays, maybe you bring him in as a changeup, right? And because you want to keep playing Dwan because you want the kid to develop, but you do it in a way that's constructive for the offense. You're not just doing it to do it. This ain't AYSO soccer, folks. You know, when Kirby brought Dwan in for the last 8.5 minutes at Arkansas, he didn't do it just to make him feel good. He did it because he wants to develop him. And that's what you got to do. You got to get guys snaps. It takes time for them to get used to the flow of the game and get used to the game speed in the SEC environment. You just can't replicate that in practice. As hard as you try, you know, as live as you make your scrimmages. I mean, I guarantee you Dwan didn't get hit like he did Saturday. You know, and that was good for him. That was good for him to get hit like Saturday and get a feel for that. So, you know, he got that out of the way. His first game's out of the way. We saw Stetson. Think about this on the Georgia offense. So, as bad as they looked, and I did. I may have been too hard on them. I've been very critical of the first half performance. I didn't think there was a good excuse for Georgia to be out prepared by Arkansas. I'm still a little bothered by it as someone that covers Georgia and Kirby Smart, because I've not seen that before. And I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and think that the real Georgia is going to show up and that we're not going to see that act against Auburn. If it does show up, if they show up like they did at Arkansas, then let's just quit talking about the potential for championships, because there's just not enough of a margin for error against the Auburns, the Tennessees, the Alabamas, the Kentuckys, and the Floridas. You just can't lay an egg against those teams like you did Arkansas and expect to just bounce back, everything's great, second half, 32-3. You're not going to do that to some of these other teams. Arkansas played spirited, but Arkansas was overmatched. And Auburn has a great deal more talent, as does Tennessee, as does Alabama, as does Kentucky, as does Florida. So Georgia had its mulligan. That first half against Auburn, they showed us they were resilient. Stetson Bennett showed us that he had stayed focused. Stetson generated almost 300 yards. Almost, it was like 289 yards in about 31 minutes. Now you go, well, gosh, if we prorate that to 60, that's over 500 yards. Yes, but that's not a realistic proration because the defense was stoning Arkansas at that point. Arkansas was on the field, off the field, on the field. The defense had locked him down. After that 91-yard drive on the second series of the game, the Georgia defense looked like the Georgia defense. They really did. Richard LeCounte had 2 picks. Like I told you, I was very impressed with Nakobe Dean. Impressed with Lewis Seen. I thought Jalen Carter, he flashed in there, and that was good to see because he's a talented guy. You just didn't know, as a true freshman, how quick can a true freshman contribute? Well, Jalen Carter answered that question. So we look at Auburn and kind of getting back at it again. I've got questions about their ability to protect Bo Nix. Bo Nix is a very good quarterback. Bo Nix, has thrown 218 consecutive passes without interception. He's very good at taking care of the ball. He's one of those charismatic leaders that make people around him better. Joe Burrow had that charisma. I'm not saying Nix has Joe Burrow skills, but he's got that charisma that players, teammates feed off of, and that makes him a very dangerous quarterback. I just don't know if Auburn can protect him well enough. Seth Williams, Anthony Schwartz, these are good receivers, very good receivers. It'll be a good test for the Georgia secondary, but the key's not going to be the secondary. The key's going to be that front 4 and that front 7. And can you get pressure on Bo Nix, number 1, and can you shut down the Auburn run and make them one-dimensional? Bo Nix was Auburn's leading rusher against Kentucky. He had like 34 yards. They didn't have a run game. I don't think Auburn can get away with Bo Nix being the leading rusher and beat Georgia. You think about the one game, the outlier in the Kirby-Gus series as head coaches, and it was the game in 2017 when Kerryon Johnson just blew through that run defense. I think for any team to really have any kind of success against the Georgia defense, they're going to have to be able to find a way to run the ball successfully. Alabama's a team that, clearly with Najee Harris and their offensive line is probably the most likely team to not be one-dimensional. All the other teams, I think, will be one-dimensional. And then the flip side is, well, now what does Georgia do on offense, right? Well, I think the most important thing is what doesn't Georgia do on offense? And what I mean by that is Georgia can't afford to turn the ball over. Whoever is under center, don't turn the ball over, right? A punt, and I hate saying this, and I know you all don't want to hear it, but until JT Daniels is healthy and under center, a punt is not a bad thing if you're Georgia because of how good this defense is. A bad thing is a turnover. A bad thing is giving the other team a short field. A bad thing is a big return. A bad thing is a blocked punt. Anything that puts the offense on the Georgia side of the field is a bad thing. And those are the things that you have to avoid like the plague if you're Georgia, because there's not going to be many teams, and I know that Arkansas did it, and I still can't believe they did it. They went 91 yards, but there was a pass interference on Eric Stokes. There was a mismatch. Somehow Tyreek Stevenson got mismatched against this really speedy guy, and they got a chunk play. And then Azeez Ojulari lost contain on his pass rush, and Felipe Franks got out of the pocket, and Richard LeCounte got caught with his eyes in the backfield, and they went over the top 49 yards. I don't think you're going to see that happen too often. In fact, that's the first time in a regular season game that a team had to play longer than 40 yards since the South Carolina game in Game 6 last year. So it's not going to happen very often. What else? I want to review some other games, just kind of blow through here. I'm going to give you kind of a buy or a sell grade on some of these other games last week because they were very intriguing. I think we're all excited. I think I told you guys, that I really didn't watch a lot of football until last weekend. I just couldn't get into these other leagues. I mean, to me, it's like there's the SEC and there's everything else, right? So Tennessee beat South Carolina 31-27. That was kind of a pressure cooker game. That's 7 wins in a row for Tennessee. But I'm not buying. I think they're playing good football, but I don't think they're playing great football. And as I said, I went on a Knoxville radio show last week. And, you folks know I covered Tennessee a long time. Tennessee coaches are judged by how they do against Florida, Alabama, and Georgia. And to this point, Jeremy in his first 2 seasons doesn't have a win against one of those 3 programs. Now, when Tennessee starts beating Georgia, Florida, or Alabama, then they're in the discussion for the SEC, for a return to the SEC championship game. But I didn't see enough to think that was going to happen this year. South Carolina, it looks like they're a little watered down. I know they got a young quarterback. They wore their all black jerseys. They had the rooster cack. I mean, they did all the South Carolina tricks they had, night game and all that, and it still wasn't enough to beat Tennessee. I'm afraid this could be Will Muschamp's last season. And it's interesting, when I covered other teams, I was never really a big fan of Will Muschamp. He just looked like a fiery hothead guy. But I think covering Georgia and seeing the Will Muschamp Kirby Smart friendship and seeing that side of Will Muschamp and more personal interaction with Will Muschamp down in Destin, and I say, you know what? I can see why Coach Boom is so popular. I can see why so many people like Will Muschamp. I know you guys like him because he's a Georgia dog, but I like Will Muschamp. I do. I'd like to see him do well, whether that's at South Carolina or as a future coordinator somewhere. But he's a very likable guy. He really is. So that was Alabama with the 38-19 win over Missouri. Missouri actually outscored Alabama 16-10 in the second half. Jalen Waddle, 8 catches, 134 yards. Boy, there's a premium receiver. You wish Georgia had a guy like that. Pickens is good. They're going to double him. I don't know that he's that electric guy as much as he's just a great catch guy. You hope Jermaine Burton maybe can grow into that Jalen Waddle figure, that explosive receiver. I think Kearis Jackson gives you something on the edges. Don't think he's Jalen Waddle, but Kearis is very important. We had hoped Demetrius Robertson could do some things. I saw Demetrius had 4 catches, but he also had a penalty and a drop. And listen, doing the critical analysis, these guys are human beings and they got families. And, we're at that part of the year now where, in the off season, everybody's undefeated and there's just nothing to criticize. But we get into the season and part of my job becomes critical analysis. Like, well, what did I see? What did I see that I'm worried about? What did I see that I liked? And college, it's interesting. In high school, obviously, when you're covering a game, you don't say, Joe Bones caught a touchdown pass when, Bill X fell down. You just say, and Joe Bones caught a touchdown pass. You don't out the bad plays in high school. In the NFL, you out everything, right? Because they're professionals and they get paid. In college, it's kind of a weird mix because they are just kids, and yet they're on such a bright stage in the SEC. So we almost treat them like they're pro players, even though they're young guys, right? Even though they still have to go to class, even though they technically don't get paid. I think they get a lot of benefits. I think these programs now give them ample opportunities. I think the value of an education is worth over $100,000. So I'm not one that says, oh, these poor players. I'm one that say, hey, these guys work really hard, but I don't call them poor players. I think they get compensated fairly for their opportunity that there's given. And that's my opinion. Now, there's going to be a name, image, likeness thing that's going to get passed, and they're going to be able to bargain for their own deals, and good for them. I'm fine with that. But, as things stand, I've seen where they live, and I see how they eat, and they got the best training and the best doctors in the world, and right now they got the best health care for that matter. But getting back to that, Alabama's better than 38-19 over Missouri. So I'm buying Alabama. I guess what I'm saying is I'm not buying Tennessee yet. I'm selling on South Carolina. I'm buying Alabama. I'm holding on Missouri. I like that they were game. I like that they outscored Alabama 16-10 in the second half. That tells me something about Eli Drinkowitz as a coach and the Missouri Tigers. I give them an outside chance for an upset in Knoxville. How about that? I liked what Nick Saban said. He said, I think from a team standpoint, when you play a first game, you sort of figure out who you are. What do I have to do to get better? Everybody on our team has a lot of maturity in what they need to do better. I think Kirby Smart is hoping that his Bulldogs have maturity. You remember, you guys heard Kirby Smart say this week, guys need to look in the mirror and ask themselves what they need to do to get better to help the team. I think that was Kirby's way of saying that. Mississippi State 44, LSU 34. That was the shocker, right? KJ Costello, 623 yards. Sorry, Eric Zier. I think he broke Eric Zier's record, you know. EZ with a lot of those records when he played for Georgia. Remember when Eric finished his career with the Dogs, he was the SEC's all-time leading passer. That's why I'm an Eric Zier fan, right? I talk with Eric, and I'm always impressed with his football knowledge. Of course, he does the calls for the Bulldogs Radio Network. Strongly recommend Eric Zier. I think he's a great listen. Obviously, tremendous football knowledge. So this is what I would say. LSU only returned 6 out of 22 starters. And when you've got that many new guys and you don't have spring drills, I think it compounds it. So not only were they young, but they were young without spring. And so I think LSU is going to be a team that will get better as the year progresses. And I'm not buying Mississippi State yet, okay? I'm still in that hold mode. It's like, okay. But I don't know that I'm all in. I'm not convinced that Mike Leach is the pirate genius. Part of me says, you know, a lot of this is LSU's youth. So I'm not, so strange as that sounds, I'm not going to sell LSU, and I'm not going to buy Mississippi State, even with that upset. I'm going to say that's a one-off. I need to see more of both those teams. Florida 51, Ole Miss 35. I know the Gator fans were excited. Kyle Trask with 6 touchdown passes. Wow. 416 yards. You know, I did some research. Ole Miss replaced 2 starters in a secondary from a defense that ranked 120th in the nation in pass defense last year. They weren't last at 130, but they were 120. So I'm not ready to buy Florida yet. The fact that they didn't really have a run game, they're having trouble run blocking at Florida still, I'm not ready to buy them. Now what I like about Florida, what I do like about Florida is their schedule. Because that LSU game we thought was going to, you know, maybe LSU's not going to be as good. Like I said, I think LSU will get better. And Texas A&M, we'll get to them in a second. That doesn't look like such a tough game. A&M only beat Vanderbilt 17-12. So Florida's schedule looks a lot easier. Remember, the Gators with 5 home games, plus they get to play Georgia and Jacksonville. Georgia with 4 home games, 5 road games, and a trip to Jacksonville. So, you know, Florida's schedule is starting to look decidedly better than Georgia's. The Ole Miss quarterback, Corral, he was 22 of 31 for 395 yards. I mean, did we know who Corral was before this game? I mean, some people go, of course we did. But some people go, I'd never heard of him. I mean, it's not like Eli Manning there or Archie Manning. 22 of 31 for 395. Now, if Florida hadn't scored 51, we'd be going, what the heck, right? 3rd and Grantham. But because Florida scored 51, that kind of falls in the shadows. And nobody's talking about it. And I'm like, why isn't anybody talking about this? And the reason why is because people look for things that support their logic and their arguments. And a lot of the media picked Florida to win. So they're not going to highlight the negative. They're not going to show you the Achilles heel. They're going to pretend like it's not really there. But we know it's there, right? We know it's there. And you can bet Kirby Smart and Todd Monken know it's there. So that game's way, way, way off in November. Lane Kiffin, we had a lot of chances to make plays to change the outcome. To me, that tells you everything, right? It tells you everything you need to know. I'm going to jump back in here and do another share of this. I was having some trouble sharing it earlier. I don't know if were any of you able to share this story earlier? I had trouble sharing it. If you guys could share it to your pages, that would be great. Yeah, so let's get on with Auburn and Kentucky now. So Pat Nix throws for 233 and 2 second-half touchdowns, and they beat Kentucky 29-13. This is a game where Kentucky actually outgained Auburn. And I saw that play in the first half. I don't know how many of you saw that play in the first half, but it sure did look to me like Kentucky got in the end zone on a run play, and it was a bad call. That's like, you know, when people go, oh, that didn't matter. It was a 16-point. No, you don't understand. the butterfly effect is always in effect for football. And I don't know how many of you know what the butterfly effect is, but it's an effect of, it's the concept that life is a series of chain reactions, right? Chain reactions. Mike was 2 minutes late out the door, and that's why he got in the car accident. Had he got out the door on time, he would have got through the traffic light before the semi came through and broadsided him and his ceramic bulldog Mason. So that's the butterfly effect. That's probably not a great example of it, but I didn't rehearse, so that's what you're stuck with. So to me, if Kentucky scores, but what I'm basically saying is if Kentucky scores there in the first half and gets that touchdown, the rest of the game is different, right? And so that's why when people say, well, it doesn't matter because they won by 16, that was only an 8-point play. Well, it changes everything. It changes the dynamics of everything. It's kind of like, the SEC title game a couple years ago when DeAndre Walker was just killing Alabama, getting in the backfield. He goes out, Brenton Cox comes in, suddenly Contain is gone, Jalen Hurts has early success, and early success leads to late success. If Walker's in the game, Hurts isn't getting out of the pocket, and Georgia wins the 2018 SEC championship game and goes back to the college football playoff. Butterfly effect. Kentucky quarterback Terry Wilson, he's back from a knee injury. He was 24-37 for 239, and he ran for 42. He's got a little mobility. Could this be why Stetson Bennett's starting? Because Terry Wilson was 24-30. So basically, he completed 2/3 of his passes, right? Approximately 65% of his passes, and ran for another 42. If Stetson Bennett is 24-37 for 239 with 42 yards rushing, does Georgia win the game? I would say it depends on what happens in the backfield. So while all of us have been talking about what we think is going to happen at quarterback, and my theory is you start Stetson Bennett, you got JT Daniels potentially in relief, and a series or two with Dwan Mathis. He brings a changeup, right? So, that's what I think. But I think the bigger question, if Stetson Bennett starts, I'm fine with that. What I'm not fine with is if James Cook plays the way he did last week. And again, this is where I get critical. And again, college, I know some of you are saying he's just a kid. You shouldn't talk bad about him. He's not a pro. He's not getting paid like his older brother. But at Georgia, you sign up for the spotlight, okay? Part of playing SEC football is that you're front and center. You are diving headfirst into the fishbowl. You know the passion, right? I'm down here covering SEC football, and I've pretty much committed my career to it over every other sport that I could cover, because to me, there's more passion for the sport. Typically, there's more color and more of an environment. I love going to the games. I love the travel. I love seeing the fans and visiting with fans at the hotel before the game and networking and getting to know people. And all that is out the window for me because, I'm not, this year I made the call, the boss says, I said, yeah, because there's no access, I'm going to cover the games from home. I didn't want to make that call, but because there was no advantage to go to the game professionally, I can get better views on television, and I get the same interview after the game on my laptop on the Zoom call, and without going to the stadium, and it provides another opportunity for a teammate to be there. So it's still part of me. It's going to be hard tomorrow. I'm not going to lie to you. It's going to be hard when I see that stadium lighten up at Sanford Stadium, and when they have that moment of silence for Coach Dye, I'll close my eyes and bow my head from home to honor that man. I've got a really, really cool story coming out on Pat Dye. I spent all day today on it. I wrote for like 8 hours, which typically my stories are a good 20-inch, 600-word, 10-minute read for you, but this one's deep, and there's some really fascinating stuff, and I don't want to ruin the surprise, but I reached out to Kirby Smart today about Pat Dye, and I didn't know what I was going to get. And what I got in return was breathtaking. It was fascinating. Kirby never ceases to amaze me. You're gonna really like this story on Pat Dye. It's a really special story you're gonna see tomorrow. Really excited about it. But anyway, it's gonna be hard not being there. I know it's different. I know the music sounds fake, but I look at the job that Josh Brooks did, the deputy AD at Georgia. he did a phenomenal job laying out this stadium, folks. The stadium's going to look so good. It's going to look like more than 23,000. It's going to look about half full because of the job Josh Brooks did. If this guy is going to be the next AD, which I believe he will be, Georgia's in good hands. You know, we had Josh on Monday night. I don't know how many of you saw the Monday night on the Beach show, but I had Josh Brooks on for about 30 minutes to talk about what the scene was going to be like on campus as far as tailgating, what you can do, what you can't do, what would be different at the stadium. And we got into talking about things, the new football building, we talked about that. And the takeaway that I had from Josh is that he's a winner. And, you know, Josh told me, you know, he worked for Nick Saban as an equipment manager at LSU way back when, which is pretty cool. So he's been around, you know, some big-time coaches. He was around Saban back then. Jimbo Fisher, he was Jimbo Fisher's student assistant coach. Josh Brooks has been in the trenches. So when Kirby Smart tells him what he needs and what he wants, and I think Greg McGarity has done a great job with this, but I think Josh will continue that. And I'll tell you, I had a good talk with Greg McGarity today. I've got so much respect for that guy. You know, he's a gentleman. He's a tremendous ambassador for Georgia. And I felt kind of bad for Georgia this week when the SEC issued that blanket waiver. No, don't get me wrong. I'm not rooting against any kid. I'm glad that Cade Mays is going to get to play. Good for him and his brother. It's a good family story, whatever you think of the family. You know, if it was your family and you got to see your two sons play together, I think you'd be happy, right? Otis Reese has not been cleared because he's not cleared by the NCAA. But what bothered me about it was the methodology of it. I've got a lot of respect for Greg Sankey, and part of me now kind of regrets being critical of him on the SEC network. It's like, what are you trying to do? You know, this is Greg Sankey, and Greg saved college football. So why are you criticizing the guy on national television? And I probably shouldn't have. I probably should have expressed my disappointment with the presidents, because all Greg did was give them another chance to vote. So if you know what I'm talking about, if you're going, Mike, what are you talking about? Okay, so the rule when you transfer in the SEC has been that you have to sit out a year unless the team is on a bowl ban, right? Or there's some other extenuating circumstance. And that didn't apply to these guys. So that was the rule that was in place. Like, this is a rule that is late as 2018 that the presidents and the athletic directors voted on, and they were unanimous. If you stay in conference, you sit out a year. They all agreed on that until you've got a guy that you want to get eligible. And Tennessee really lobbied hard, and in doing so, they hired a lawyer that hurled these accusations at Georgia that, it's a toxic environment. And, you know, you say, well, that's freedom of speech. Well, the problem is Georgia can't tell their side of the story. And I hate it when that happens. It's like, that's not fair, you know, because, you know, Cade Mays' attorney can say this, but Georgia can't fire back. You know, they're legally bound to be silent on it. And it just created a stink. And, you know, Otis Reese with his allegations, and Georgia can't really answer back, as Kirby said. And then the waiver gets granted, and some people go, well, it didn't have anything to do with the details of the case. What it had to do with was the social pressure that was being applied on Greg Sankey and the SEC and the presidents to make everybody eligible. It's like, okay, look, it's a COVID-19 year, so you're all free to transfer. It's kind of like if the state police said, we got COVID-19, so everybody drive 100 miles an hour. We don't care. No tickets for anybody. And I don't like that. It's kind of like, no, you know. And when they put out the release, they said it was because of COVID-19. I go, well, no, wait a minute. Both of these guys transferred in January before COVID-19. That's really not why. But what I think the reason they passed the blanket waiver for guys like Cade Mays get eligible in the SEC was because there was no eligibility being charged to the players that are playing the season. So anyway, that's my piece on that. That's probably not nearly as interesting as talking football, but sometimes I gotta have these releases, right? I get these ideas in my head. these concepts, these things I want to share with you, perceptions, narrative, whatever you want to say. I want to give you a direct point of view verbally on what happened there. And then obviously, whenever you have questions, you can ask me questions in the comment thread, or you can follow me on Twitter at MikeGriffith32. If you follow me on Twitter at MikeGriffith32 and send me messages, I'll respond to you. You know, I probably shouldn't, because I send people messages and then 2 months later they go, I had a very interesting exchange with Mike Griffith and blah, blah, blah. And today I disagree with him, so he's a jerk. And here's what he said to me privately 2 months ago. And I'm like, why do I talk to these people? Why do I, because that's what we do. Because that's what we do. And sometimes people are going to disagree with you. And sometimes people are going to be critical. And sometimes people aren't going to like what you say. And they're going to let you know it. And on Twitter, they're going to do it sometimes in a very annoying and obnoxious way. And so you kind of got to like steel yourself to it and be like, okay, people are going to call me names today. Like, I predict Georgia to win by 13 points against Auburn, 23-10, right? And somebody, oh, you're such a homer. What do you mean I'm a homer? I think Georgia's going to win by 13 points. It doesn't have anything to do with the fact that I covered Georgia. I picked against Georgia. I picked against them last year against Alabama. Or in the SEC title game against Alabama, I picked against them. I picked against them when they play LSU. I pick them to win when I think they're going to win. It doesn't affect me. Kirby doesn't care. The players don't care. They don't care who's picking what. People have this misperception that if you cover a team, that you got to pick them to win games and you can only say nice things. Well, you guys know I don't only say nice things. I say plenty of critical things, probably too much, actually. So, those are some of the keys for this. Other games this week, I want to kind of go through the other games with you. Florida at home, minus 18.5, 16.5 against South Carolina. I like Florida to cover. I hate to say it. Like I said earlier, I just think South Carolina's done. Tennessee at home, minus 12.5. I like Missouri to cover in an outside shot for an upset. Outside shot. Alabama at home, minus 18 against A&M. I don't think A&M showed a whole lot in that 17-12 win against Vanderbilt, but I don't think it matters. I think Alabama's offense is just too explosive, and I'm just not buying on a Kellen Mond. Kentucky minus 7 home against Ole Miss. This could be an interesting game. I don't know. That's kind of a toss-up game for me. I guess I would take Kentucky and give the 7 points. I think Kentucky's got a good defense. LSU minus 21 at Vanderbilt. I think LSU bounces back. LSU's got too many explosive players. I think they're going to grow up fast. So I'm going to take LSU and give the points. Mississippi State at home minus 17 against Arkansas. I know Mike Leach and his, KJ Costello over 600 yards on LSU. I think Arkansas is going to give them more of a game. I'm going to take Arkansas to cover. I'm going to show a little faith in Sam Pittman. And then, I've shared with you guys that I think that Georgia will beat Auburn 23-10. So some thoughts there. I'll take a look at some of your comments before we go here tonight. Really enjoyed, visiting with you guys tonight on Friday night. I'm inside. I'm not on the porch. I think the air conditioning in the couch has kind of mellowed me out a little bit. It's just not the same as being out on the porch, but the temperatures are dropping a little bit. And I don't know, it's kind of cozy in here, right? So I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Marshall agrees with me 85% of the time. So that means that I'm right 85% of the time, Marshall. I like your logic, Marshall. I'm with you on that. Did I forget to pay the internet bill, or did Mike? Uh-oh, Kenneth, am I freezing? I haven't had that problem. I actually have jacked up my internet service to the highest speed. So maybe I need to get a new router. Can you guys tell me, am I freezing on anybody else? When one person says you're freezing, I don't know. Yeah, Kenneth says I'm freezing on his screen. Am I freezing on anyone else's screen? Can you let me know? Because I can only get feedback from one person. I don't know if other people are having a problem with me freezing on the screen. I'm not seeing any comments on that. Sorry, Kenneth. Hopefully I'm not freezing. I don't think so. Justin Helton wants to know, why isn't anyone talking about Carson Beck? I had some questions about that. I think the answer is that Carson Beck is just not physically ready. I just don't think he's built big and strong, and he's a true freshman. Let the kid get some meat on his bones. Thank you, Jacob O'Neill, for letting me know that you're getting a good stream. I just don't think that he's built big and strong and thick enough. And I don't think Georgia wants to put a kid out there that might get hurt. Remember when Tennessee trotted that kid out there last year, Maurer, against Georgia, and Eric Stokes went in there and just blew him up with that blitz? That kid hasn't been the same since. And I don't think you want to do that to a young quarterback. So I think they're protecting Carson. I think Carson is a great quarterback. And I think he's got a very good future. So don't ruin him, okay? Don't throw him out there too soon. Don't let him get blown up or hit hard or injured or anything like that. Give him time to marinate. Carson Beck's got a long time to play football at Georgia, and he's shown us that he's all in. Somebody asked me another question: why aren't we talking more about JT Daniels? Well, the answer is because we don't think he practiced much with the first team, and we think that he's going to be in a reserve role. And once again, this is a 10-game season, and I believe you're going to need JT Daniels at the end of the year to win a championship. I think Stetson Bennett can get you by Auburn. I think he can. I'm not sure. I'm not 100%. He certainly was good enough to get you by Arkansas. But I think if you're Kirby, that you try to be smart with your players and get everything out of the, 10-game SEC season. Remember that statistic, folks. Only 4 out of 14 SEC teams last year had the same quarterback start every game, and that was with an 8-game league schedule. Now we're talking about 10. So, it's not a very forgiving schedule, and I think you don't really want to put JT out there until you know he's comfortable. We know he's cleared, but being cleared and being comfortable are two different things. And, with that knee, that's the plant knee, that right knee. That's where he generates a lot of his power on his throws. So for a pinpoint guy like JT Daniels, being a little off could be a lot off. The kind of throws that he's going to make, those deep outs, 20-yard outs, those flies, those deep passes, right? He's going to need that plant leg, and he's going to need it. Someone says, what if JT ain't the answer? Then Georgia doesn't win a title. But I can tell you that I believe without a shadow of a doubt that he's the best quarterback on the team. I don't think there's any question. Based on what I saw, the 30-minute scrimmage that I saw, which was scrimmage 2, I liked how quickly JT got rid of the ball. I like how decisive he was. He made some beautiful throws. I mean, this guy is an NFL talent. He truthfully is. I don't know how to work out. How does the rest of the offense work? Do the receivers run the right routes? Or are we talking about Jermaine Burton, running the wrong route like he did to Dwan Mathis? I mean, Jermaine runs an in when he's supposed to sit in his zone, and Dwan throws a pick, and everybody goes, oh, Dwan Mathis threw an interception. And they don't go, oh, wait a minute, Jermaine Burton ran the wrong route, and that's why there was an interception. Can the receivers can the receivers get it right? That's a big part of this. But the biggest part, I'm going to go back to this to you guys again. I can't stress this enough. You've got to have a playmaker in that single back. Whether it's James Cook or Zamir White or Kenny McIntosh, you got to have some juice back there, man. That guy's got to be a playmaker. That guy's got to make the first guy miss. That guy's got to get to the second level. You need that 5-yard route to turn into 10, 15, 40, 60. That's where your plays are made. The scariest statistic in the Georgia-Arkansas game was that Georgia ran 89 plays, and the longest play from scrimmage was 26 yards, and it was to the tight end. That's the scariest play, the scariest statistic, was that the longest play was 26 yards out of 89 snaps. Kirby said more explosive plays. You guys are calling for Kenny McIntosh. I agree. I think Kenny McIntosh could be a breakout guy. Thought Kenny did great on the kick returns. He averaged over 40 yards. I don't really want to see him there. I think he's too valuable for that. I want to see him in the backfield. But I'm going to guess that James Cook's going to get another shot. I'd heard the field was slick at Arkansas. I think we're going to see James Cook get another shot. And I think we're going to see Zamir's going to keep being Zamir. And I think that Zamir showed us some flashes of greatness. I was disappointed with the short yardage runs. There were a couple other runs I didn't think he maximized, but I saw some sparks, like literally some sparks flap from his feet. Saw some cuts, saw a couple good open. Once they got that offense rolling, once the air raid got going and the field was spread and we had tempo, I saw Zamir White do some things. Maybe Zamir White can catch hold. It's like an engine that's kind of misfiring. That's a bad engine. That was a bad imitation of an engine, but and then it catches fire, and I'm not even going to give you the engine catching fire. You can just use your imagination what it sounds like when an engine kicks up and the fuel gets into the engine. Like when you start your weed whacker and you take the throttle off, and now the juice is going, and now you can really. And can that be Zamir White? Can he be that engine that's really turning it up now? After 2 years of sputtering along on bad knees and not having that psychological confidence that he can cut. So maybe this is Zamir's coming out party. That would be great. That would be big. Because what I saw at Arkansas doesn't look anything like DeAndre Swift. And I knew there would be a drop-off from DeAndre because I think DeAndre is very special. There were some durability issues, but when DeAndre Swift was on, man, beautiful runner to watch. I mean, DeAndre Swift, you guys know it. I mean, he was the truth. Some of those spins and cuts and, some of those runs against Kentucky the last 2 years, you're just like, oh my gosh, these guys are never going to forget being on this highlight video. He was unbelievable. I like what Marcinio Askew's talking about using Darnell Washington, the 6'7" tight end and the 26-yard catch he had. I think he can give you some sparks, but the problem, it's not a problem, but the issue, and Kirby talked about it, was him getting into shape. He's a true freshman. It's a big adjustment. Now, physically, he looks ready. Is he ready mentally? And how many snaps in a row can he go? You only use him in spells. You want a guy there that you can count on to block and know his assignments as well as catch those passes. And he's a young guy. Tight end is one of the hardest positions on a football team to learn because you've got to block, you got to run routes. You basically got to know what everybody's doing around you. So I think we'll see Darnell in spurts. I want to see Trey McKitty get out there. I think Trey McKitty is a difference maker. I really do. I don't know that he's going to be ready this week. I know he had some snaps this week in practice. When will he be full throttle? Hopefully by Alabama if you're Georgia, because I think you're going to need him. I think you're going to need all hands on deck for Bama. I think Arian Smith may be back for Bama. William Perry, why so low key tonight? I think it's because I'm inside. And there's an echo in here. And if I start yelling and speaking too loud, it echoes. And it's like I said, it's my indoor voice. It's my indoor voice versus my outdoor voice. So there you go. Why low key? There's just a lot I wanted to cover tonight, William. I mean, there was just I did like a little pre-show sheet, and I just said, man, there's a lot to talk about. I want to talk about last week. I want to talk about this week. I want to talk about, the blanket waiver. I want to talk about Greg McGarity. I want to talk about Josh Brooks. I want to talk about the quarterbacks. I want to talk about the running backs. I want to talk about Pat Dye. And again, that story tomorrow. Believe me, I do not live in a mansion. This is not a big house at all. It's just big enough for me. It does have an open foyer though, so that's why. But it's not a big house, I can tell you that. But it's big enough, to each their own. I don't need a big house. I've had big houses before when I had my kids living with me, and it was great. But when you're an empty nester and you live by yourself, having a big house can get lonely because you don't want it. So you don't want it to be too big. It just kind of magnifies the fact that your kids are grown and gone. And as a parent, this is where I get preachy and I tell everybody, hey, take advantage of it while they're there because you're going to miss them when they're gone. Believe me, I do. Every day, I miss them when they're gone. Every day. And you're going, what have I tuned into? We were talking about football, Griff. You're losing it, man. No, I'm not losing it. My son's here visiting, and I'm excited to see him. So I'm going to cut the show off. I think we've gone a while tonight. But if you guys have got questions, please ask them. I'll go back in these comments for you. We're going to talk about this stuff. Danny Guyton, the offensive line suspect. We talked about that earlier in the show. Reggie Pope says the team that rushes for 150. I don't know if anybody is going to run for 150 this year. I think Najee didn't even get 100 yards on Missouri. This is a real pass. The off season, because I think what all you could do in the off season without the spring, right, was all the skeleton work. And so I think the blocking and the tackling is what's off. When we look at football, I think everybody's been playing 7-on-7 in shorts and underwear, and because that's all they could do because of COVID. And I think that's why the blocking and the tackling is bad across the board. Will it get better as the season progresses? Yes, it will. But again, my thought is Georgia's had their mulligan. I think you're going to see a sharper Georgia team. I don't think it's going to be perfect, but I think you're going to see a Georgia team that's going to be good enough to be in control of this football game. In other words, I don't think we're going to have any anxious moments tomorrow where we go, oh my gosh, Georgia might lose. I don't think you're going to think that at any point. I think you're going to see Georgia stay in control of the game. So everybody, be safe this weekend. I know you saw the President of the United States has contacted the coronavirus. That's a reminder that anybody can get it. It's still out there. Wear your masks. Do your social distancing. Follow your local protocols. Take care of yourself. And if you take chances, make sure they're measured risks. Understand what you're doing before you do it. Don't feel the peer pressure. Make decisions that are good for you and your family. And enjoy this weekend, because I can't wait for tomorrow. It's going to be a great environment at Sanford Stadium. I think the Georgia Bulldogs are really going to reward the Georgia fans. And I think Auburn is going to show that Bo Nix is a good quarterback, but he needs a supporting cast too. So everybody enjoy your weekend, and I'll be back at halftime of the game. I'm going to give you a halftime report. So hit me up. Give me your questions on the thread. Follow me on Twitter at MikeGriffith32, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.